quick unit overview of these skills. So a couple of them, this one is the same as we already encountered in Unit 1. The difference is, instead of talking about the narrator, we talk about the speaker. So that's a thing to remember. When we're talking about poetry, we mention the speaker. I apologize in advance for my awful handwriting. Okay, now the next skill. Explain the function of structure in a text. So I think it's important to consider the little bits of essential knowledge for this one, and that will point to ways that this is like the same, like structure. That's something that we looked at regarding short stories, but we approach it a little bit differently for poetry. So it's important to remember that we're thinking about like line breaks and stanza breaks and how that relates to the development and relationship of ideas. And then also that the arrangement of lines and stanzas contributes to the development and relationship of ideas in a poem. So again, we're looking at stanza breaks and the way lines and stanzas are arranged when we're considering how structure functions in the text, a poetic text. And then this next point, a text structure affects readers' reactions and expectations. Okay, so that's already 2 skills. So character, we refer to the speaker, not the poet or not the guy, right? Just the speaker when we're discussing matters of character, particularly perspective and motives. And then with structure, we're looking at line and stanza breaks. What are they? How are they used? How do they arrange ideas? How do they develop ideas? And how does that affect readers' reactions? All right, third skill is explain the function of contrasts. So this is a new skill, okay? And what are contrasts? Here we are. Here's a little bit of information to consider. Contrasts are the result of shifts or juxtapositions or both. Right, a shift is something that oftentimes relates up to skill 3C. If we're thinking about a poem's tone or a poem's, subject matter shifting from one stanza to the next, a juxtaposition usually has more to do with particular word choice, i.e. diction. So like it says here, shifts may be signaled by a word, a structural convention, i.e. stanza break, line break, or punctuation. So with that, I'm thinking how in the poem, I am offering this poem by Jimmy Santiago Baca, right? He says, I love you, comma, I love you, hold up, I love you, comma, I love you, comma, I love you, comma, and then at the end, I love you, period, right? So we see the shift based on punctuation in that case. Shifts may emphasize contrast between particular segments of a text. Okay, so already that's skill 1A, 3C, and 3D. Next we have we're looking at figurative language. So these are skills that we may have discussed at various points because it'd be kind of weird not to talk about figurative language when we see it, but it figures in extra heavily when we are discussing poetry. So skill 5B, explain the function of specific words and phrases in a text. That's the same as last time, but things we want to consider in particular are like ambiguous reference and antecedents. These are all terms that are in that lit terms resource that you have. And then also we're looking at repetition in relation to figurative language and alliteration. So this is a device of sound, right? Because you have to really read a poem out loud to really get the sense of the sound of things, as well as sometimes with the repetition, right? That can kind of fall under the realm of sound. But we're looking at this. What is the deal with ambiguity? It means that you can look at things in multiple ways. Like amb means both, right? Like if somebody's ambidextrous, that means they can use both hands. An amphibian is a frog, so both. So if something's ambiguous, it can be taken both ways, whatever those 2 or more ways are. So considering that. All right, next is explain the function of a simile, and then we've got a function of a metaphor. Not super different, but we just remember simile uses like or as. whereas a metaphor doesn't need to use that. Okay, so implies similarities between two usually unrelated concepts or objects in order what? To reveal or emphasize one or more things about them, though the differences between the two may also be revealing. Okay, and then in the metaphor, a thing being compared to the main subject, okay, etc., etc. Comparisons draw on the experiences and readers. I think this is important to note. You have to draw from your own experiences and your own association. So that's why there's not exactly a right and wrong answer ever for these things. Ew, that looks gross. You have to draw on your own experiences, right? So let's see, how am I going to put this? Draw upon your own experiences and associations. I'm not going to write the whole word. All right, and then another little nugget to consider. Interpretation of a metaphor may depend on the context of its use, right? Context is key. That is, what is happening in a text may determine what is transferred in the comparison. So that means, if you see a multiple choice question and it says, oh, on line such and such, this metaphor is used, what does it mean? We always have to consider context. So context means consider lines before and after. Consider lines before and after a metaphor. Right? So we always got to take it in context. All right. I wanted to keep this really short. So that's it. Those are our focus skills for this first poetry unit. Character, right? Describing what textual details reveal about a character, their perspective, and their motives. So make sure when you're talking about this stuff that you don't just say, oh, this reveals something about their motives. That's like saying nothing at all. So make sure you say, like, what is that person's perspective? Describe it. What are the characters' motives? Are they selfish? Are they selfless? Are they generous? Are they whatever, right? So use those describing words. So this requires lots of adjectives generally, okay? And then here, structure, get into line and stanza, nitty gritty. So like this is about like a lot of times like the physical look of a poem. All right, that's what we're cluing into. Contrast, this is like words and phrases, as well as punctuation. And then this is function of words and phrases, so pretty similar to the last, but considering ambiguity, how we can notice things like on a symbolic level. And then simile and metaphor. All right, that's it.